Could you tell us what mistakes CISOs make typically, and how should they go about becoming this positive force within the organization?
As CISOs, we don't own the risk, right? It's not our risk; it's the business risk.
Then there is a very dark phase where he just goes off the radar. And then he comes back. And when he comes back, he does exactly what you're saying. He goes to each of the businesses and says, what matters to you?
And he said, if you cannot demonstrate a risk that is valued at over $50 million, then I'm not doing it.
We come with a preconceived set of notions and we decide for the business what risk means to them.
You're going to lose more than you're going to win.
So, hello everyone. This is KK Mukhi here. I am the founder and CEO of Network Intelligence. I'm very excited to have our guest today, Larry Whiteside Jr. from Confide. He's the president and co-founder of Confide and has almost 3 decades of experience in cybersecurity. Larry, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Confide, and your journey that got you till here.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. As most know, I love to run my mouth, so any opportunity I get to do so, I will jump at it. A little bit about myself. I like to always start out that I am a faith-based guy to start with. Like everything I do is based on my faith and religion. So beyond that, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'll reverse that. I'm a husband first, and then a father. I like to make sure that I put it in that order for many obvious reasons. But I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a cyber executive. There's a lot of things that I put my hands in. You know, I'm a DEI champion, right? I'm always trying to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in different parts of the cyber ecosystem. So it's an interesting story how I got here, and that's a whole nother conversation because a lot of people look at me and don't see the scars and all the things that I've had to do to get to where I am today, and I'm very thankful for those scars because those were learning opportunities. But you know, I've been a CISO / CTO or CSO 8 times over my career at a number of different types of organizations, both very, very large and global and down to, you know, relatively small SMBs. And it's been a fun journey, but they've all basically culminated into what I'm doing now. And so in last year, after I left my last CISO role, I made the decision along with a buddy of mine to begin going down the path of starting a technology reseller, specifically in the cyberspace. And that's where Confide, as you see on my shirt, the C stands for Confide. We came to the realization that after having been in the industry for so long, after having watched what's going on as it relates to the selling motion of cyber today, that there needed to be a different option put out there. And so we started Confide Group. And so we are very thankful that we are able to help cyber executives across the globe find technologies to solve problems.
Awesome. And but do give us a little bit of insight into the journey so far, Larry. It's always interesting to hear about the ups and downs and the pitfalls and the successes and the failures that get us to where we are and who we are today. So
yeah, I can.
Interesting. Any nice battle scars you can tell us about?
Yeah, I've got a lot of them. I've been fired. I've had a number of different things happen to me. And I'll share that, you know, in my early days, and again, because I'll be 53 in a month. And having been this old in this industry, when you start out as a cyber executive in the private sector, and I say the private sector because I got my background from the military. I'm an ex-military officer. And I did not plan on going into the military, but my grandfather, who was a Tuskegee Airman, God rest his soul, he basically begged me to go try and become an officer because And his quote was, and I laugh at it all the time, was that technology stuff is going to go away, baby Larry, but we're always going to need pilots. So go. So at the behest of my grandfather, I went and talked to a military recruiter. Lo and behold, they had technical careers in the military, so that was sort of my springboard. But once I got into private sector and became a cyber executive, it was a different world. And one of the things I learned most quickly is that influence matters. I've been in organizations where, and I talk to many CISOs today where they are in organizations where they can't get anything done. And the role of the CISO being what it is, them not being able to get anything done, there's a number of different reasons, whether they are buried from a role perspective, whether they don't have the right reporting relationship, but most of it comes down to influence. And I had one of the best times in the world when I first came out of the military, and I was working for an organization, and I was helping cyber executives around the globe with different projects and initiatives. And I had this one executive that I was flying around the country with, going to all of her data centers, doing some checks, and giving her guidance on what they needed to do to better secure all these data centers. But then when I came back and I put this report together, and I had to give her this report that she then took up to her leadership team, she was able to sort of push the ball across the goal line to get the funding and get the budgets and get some of the things that needed to be done. And when we dove into why, we started realizing she didn't have the cachet or the relationships and the influence to get a lot of things done that she needed to. And though I wasn't in an executive role at the time, I watched that. I wasn't in a CISO role. I was in an executive consultative role. I watched that and I saw the power of influence. I recognized the power of influence to be able to get things done. And so fast forward, I was in a CISO role at one point in New York City, and I had a boss that I was reporting into, a CIO, who basically told me to not share some things that had come out poorly from a risk assessment that we had. And I was basically told, like, you do not do this, do not let anybody know that this happened. And I'm like, whoa, like, I can't do that. Right? Like that's it goes against my creed. Like I can't, like I'm a cyber executive. That's I'm leaving the organization at risk. But because I had created relationships and I had influence, I went to the head of internal audit, right, and was able to share with them, hey, here's what's going on, here's what's happened. Now, was it a career limiting decision? It could have been, right? But because this person and because the things were egregious enough, the head of internal audit brought these things up at a board meeting, like, hey, so this is what's going on. But because I had created relationships, I had created enough trust around the boardroom and around the executive leadership team that even though I let those things out, through the back door, so to speak, and the boss that I was reporting to was not very happy with me about it, there wasn't much that he could do because I actually made the right decision by putting those things out there. So, and I've got a bunch of war stories. I've had a
Yeah.
I've had a reorg structure where I ended up reporting into somebody else. And if I'm not at my desk, I'm getting notes in our I don't even remember what our chat platform was at the time, but I'm getting notes. Hey, where are you? Why aren't you at your desk? I don't see that you have a meeting. Right. So I've been through some very, very tough times.
Amazing. Larry, I want to go back to this point of influence, and a lot of CISOs struggle with this. I remember reading a book called Project Phoenix, which is actually not about security but about DevOps, but it has a clear storyline about the CISO and how he's struggling to drive his point across the business, and they don't care, and then how he finally manages to win them over and align himself and get the job done. Could you tell us what mistakes CISOs make typically, and how should they go about becoming this positive force within the organization and this kind of person of influence and trust rather than this checkpoint and being seen as the last hurdle before things are allowed to go live, right? So
Yeah,
how should the CISO approach this challenge?
yeah, I talk about this quite a bit, and I tell people you have to create individual relationships with everyone, right? With
Hmm.
every part of the executive leadership team. So, and when I say this, I say executive leadership team, but in reality, it is both your direct peers across all lines of business, as well as your boss's direct peers across all lines of business, right? And the reason that's important is because if they don't know not just who you are, but also what you do and how it's going to impact them, you're never going to get anything done. You're never going to be able to, when tough times come, and they will, budgets are going to decrease, right? Revenue is going to be in flux, and you're going to have tough times, but you still need to get things done. Then they aren't going to, A, know who you are or have trust in you that you've built up. So, a tool and a technique that I've used that I share with everyone is I go around and have conversations over my first 6 months in the role with every single leader, both at my level, right? So sometimes you have it what's called an ELT, executive leadership team, and then an SLT, a senior leadership team. And for me, I want to know how everyone is bonused. If you understand how people are incentivized in the jobs and the roles that they have, you'll better understand both their motivations. You'll get some clear things on that, but then you'll also understand how you can enable them through the security practices that you're doing, right? And when you start drawing the lines to how they're incentivized, and then create those dotted lines to the initiatives that you have that are going to help that or enable that, that's going to make them more ingratiated to you, more close to you and better understanding, so that when you need to get something done, right? And there's oh, we don't have the money to do this thing, and you need to go garner support at the executive leadership team or the senior leadership team, you're likely going to get more buy-in from people, right? When you go, if you go to the board and half the people around the boardroom are already aware of this and understand how what you're asking to do is going to directly positively impact what they're doing, you will be amazed at how much support matters. And so, but that comes through.
Larry, I want to interrupt you here because I have so many questions,
Yep.
and I want to keep shooting them out. So you're saying that you should talk not only to your peers, which I kind of understand, but also your boss's direct peers, which
Absolutely.
is very interesting. I would never imagine doing that. What's the premise for that meeting? How will you reach out to them? On what basis? What's the agenda for that meeting? And how are you going to ask them what their bonus structure looks like? Is
Right.
it just you just go out and outright ask them that, or is it, do you lead up to that? What does that approach and that conversation look like? And
Yeah.
then
Good
you,
question.
how do you make sure you're not stepping on your boss's toes? Like he doesn't feel like you're, or he or she doesn't feel that you're kind of trying to one up them, right?
Yeah, this is where transparent conversations comes in, right?
Hmm.
This is your boss should know about it, right? Your boss
Yes,
shouldn't be blind to the fact that you're meeting their peers. So
of
you should
course.
go to your boss and communicate your why. Your why you want to meet your boss's peers is because you want to understand the business. Listen, the CISO more than ever now is a business leader, right? We are no longer technologists. We are
Yep.
business, and we hire cyber technologists to enable us to meet the needs of the business, right? So, just like the CIO goes out, listens to the business objectives that they are doing, and then creates their technology strategy to support and enable the business. Cyber has the same responsibility, right? But a lot of times, it is far better for you to hear it directly from them what those things are,
Hmm.
right? So that you get a clear understanding of what, because you may have different ideas based on what they're trying to do from a business perspective. Your boss, whether it's the CIO, CTO, whatever technology leader you might report into, or you might report it to the CRO, but you want to hear firsthand, and you want these personal relationships yourself. You don't want to have a relationship that's oh, you know them because your boss has introduced you to them. You
Yep.
want to be able to walk into any office, because here's the reality: any one of those executive leaders can have an incident that they've got to be part of an incident response. They've got to be, right. There's a lot of things. So you as the cyber leader, you've almost got a duty and responsibility for them to know who you are and know what you're doing. And now you're not going to be reporting to them right every time you're doing something, but what you want to do is you want to be able to have a conversation. So for me, I set them up for once a quarter. So first I went to my boss. Here's what I'm doing and why. I want to build a relationship with them so that they trust me as I'm making decisions from a security standpoint, that I understand their business, right? I've never had a boss say no to that. Then when I go out to them and I'm saying, hey, I want to understand your business, what I'm saying is I want to understand. I start off with, I introduce myself, give them a little bit about my background, where I've come from, some of the things I've accomplished. Let's say, I want to understand your business from your perspective. What are you ultimately responsible for, right? How do you generate money for the business? And then what's your over, right? How are you incentivized? What are the things that I can do to support, right, your revenue goals? Because they're all trying to make money. Everybody's got a P&L.
Yep.
Right? And so I want to figure out how I can support your revenue goals, right? And what does it look like if you achieve all your revenue goals or you exceed all your revenue goals? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your team, right? Because you are then showing, like they've never, and I've had people say this, I've never had somebody from security ask me these questions, right? They said they've always been here to tell me things I can't do and set these boundaries of, you can't do this, you can't do that, versus asking about the things that are important to me. And so it's resonated quite well. Now, you're going to have different personalities of people who are going to give you different levels of depth, right, on what they tell you, right? But I always utilize and reference things in the room to make them comfortable. If I see, their spouse, right, or I see a picture of their family, or I see, they've got a cross, they're wearing a cross. Like, I will try and pick up on different little things to try and create conversation that's going to make them comfortable with me, where they're then potentially open to sharing more than they would if it was just a straight A and B conversation.
This is exactly what is also outlined, by the way, in the book Project Phoenix, which is that the CISO is struggling. It starts off with them facing a PCI audit, and card numbers are all over the place, and nobody cares, and the business is not listening to them at all. And then there is a very dark phase where he just goes off the radar. And then he comes back. And when he comes back, he does exactly what you're saying. He goes to each of the businesses and says, what matters to you? How do I help you achieve those goals? And then it turns around to the situation where the business then tells him that, are we ready for the PCI next cycle of the PCI audit? What do we need to do to make sure that you guys have an easy time, a smooth ride during the audit? And this is also very true of how security professionals typically work. I have been guilty of the same. We come with a preconceived set of notions, and we decide for the business what risk means to them.
That's right.
And it is extremely enlightening when you go and actually, with an open mind, ask the business what matters to you, what concerns you, what kind of threats do you perceive. So
listen, I love that though. I love that entire dialogue, because it's exactly what CISOs run into today. Like, it is actively happening. There's probably at least a few CISOs that are having this exact conversation today. They're being told, that doesn't matter, right? And they don't know how to articulate what it is they want to get done, but also understand that as CISOs, we don't own the risk. Right, it's not our risk; it's the business risk, right? Yes. And so I had a CEO that literally, like, we were going down the path of getting cyber liability insurance, and the premiums were high and everything, and he said, "Listen, I don't want to do this." And he said, "If you cannot demonstrate a risk that is valued at over $50 million, then I'm not doing it." I was like, "Okay," like I couldn't do it. I could not identify a risk that the potential loss was going to be over $50 million. So we didn't get cyber liability insurance because we weren't regulated to get it. There was nothing mandating that we get it. So all right, fine. right? It was something we chose not to do. But a lot of CISOs they struggle with it, right? They like it's a real struggle to have this passion for excuse me, for mitigating risk, fixing problems, and then being told no. And then also being in the position that knowing when a problem arises, we're the ones that are going to be on the hot seat, right? We're
Hmm.
the ones that are going to have to respond to, have to, stand up the incident response team and participate in those calls and keep everybody updated, right? So there's this whole dichotomy of, yes, we don't own the risk, but we own the response, right? And so there's this, cart, chicken or egg, cart before the horse type thing. So I tell everybody all the time, every CISO, I say, listen, you're going to go into a CISO role. You're going to see a million different problems, right? But your first order of business should be to get your response capabilities ready. Period. Point blank. If you
Hmm.
don't have an ability to respond set in stone where you can execute upon that immediately, then
Hmm.
you're going to be in trouble because every organization at some point in time is going to have an incident. It's just the nature of the beast that we live in today, right? So with that, people are measured based on their response, right? Nobody any longer cares if you have a breach. Everybody's going to have a breach. What people care about is what's your response to the breach? How do you respond? Are you transparent? Are you quick? Are you like what does that look like for you as an organization? Right? Your third parties and fourth parties, what are you responding to them? What's the time frame that you're getting out some public message to your customer base? Internally to your business users. How quickly are you able to get this eradicated and recover systems and do all of those different types of things? That is what's going to matter first. The other stuff is going to come, right? Getting your foundational security tools in place and getting, email security and all these other things in place. Those are going to be very important. But if you don't have a response capability, you are literally basically looking to get yourself fired immediately.
In fact, that could be a great premise to do those business meetings as well. That that is an area that you're looking to build. So the more you understand the business, the better you'll be able to build the cyber response strategy and the run books.
Right.
In fact, when I do these incident response drills where we bring in the non-tech leadership as well,
Yep.
that's my kind of intent with them to tell them that this is don't just think tech will take care of it. There is a lot that lies on your shoulders as well. There's a lot that rides on you guys and how you reach out to your customers and stakeholders and regulators. And in fact, we even talk about drafting the tweets and the Facebook and posts and keeping those drafts ready, so that at that time you're kind of not running
Right.
around like deer in the headlights kind of syndrome, which is what happens with, and I'm sure you've been in that situation, that kind of a high pressure situation where everybody's just scrambling and trying to cover their own backsides. So that's, I think, a great place to start. I think most CISOs, when they go into a new role or a new organization, would find that that's a great area of improvement right off the bat, and also helps bring in, as many leaders as, and also is a great premise to go approach them for those initial conversations to build that trust. Um, what advice would you give to CISOs, Larry, in general, in terms of prepping for their jobs, keeping themselves updated? How do they stay ahead of the curve, especially with this? First it was the wave of cloud, which took a few years to um, become de facto, but with AI, it's like a few months, and then quantum's coming, and who knows what's that going to be like? But how do you advise CISOs to kind of stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah. So as a CISO, there's multiple curves to unfortunately try and stay ahead of, right? So you've got the curve of business. It is important for CISOs to understand and know how to speak in business terms, right? So understand
Yes.
8K, understanding a 10K, right? If you're going to go to a public company, you should you should be reading those and taking time out to understand the different components of those public filing documents, right?
Mhm.
Now, if those don't matter to you and those are things that you're in a private company and those aren't happening, great. You should still understand them because I guarantee your CFO understands them. So, but then being able to speak in whatever the language of your business is, financial services, healthcare, whatever that is, you need to be able to have a business conversation with pretty much everybody from the senior leadership on up, right? To understand and be able to take the business terms. So I'll give it a perfect example. The head of nursing at a health system, right? The head of nursing is not a technologist by any stretch of the imagination, but they do utilize systems, they do
Mhm.
utilize data, right? That you as a CISO have some responsibility to help protect, right? So you need to be able to speak in where when you're talking with the head of nursing, helping them understand based on the operational processes that they have, the things that you're doing that are going to enable them to be more efficient, to save money, whatever that may be in their area, right? So because when the technology goes down, they go back to paper processes. So they don't like paper processes; they hate them. So you need to be able to understand for them authentication matters. You need to be able to understand that for them there's a lot of different little nuances that just make their day easier. So speaking in terms that are going to align to their day to day, right? But then also you have this piece of staying ahead of technology. So staying
Mhm.
ahead of technology is an important part, and so that's where I say community comes in. It is impossible for one person to know everything. It's just not a thing, right? And so I tell people all the time that you need to have what I call your personal board of directors, which is people, at least 5 people that are some in and some outside of the industries you work in that you go to for advice, mentorship, those types of things. But then you should have a community of people, right, that you can pick up your phone and get into a Slack group or into a Signal text group or into a WhatsApp text group with and just ask questions and listen to other people ask questions and watch dialogue and see. Community is the fastest area of knowledge growth
Mhm.
because the bigger your community, right, the more different types of people and different types of expertise you're going to see and hear from on a regular basis. So I'm the chief advisory officer for a thing called the CISO Society. The CISO Society is a community of 1,700 CISOs across the globe. The community, like when they come together as they engage inside of the Slack channels and text groups and all these different things, the information that they share, the questions that get asked, you can go in and ask a question and get 300 people coming back to you about a particular topic, right? And now you've gotten 3 different unique answers to this one question where you are going to learn and get these different perspectives that now you can learn and ingest and create your own thing to take back based on why you needed that question answered, right? And so, I mean, it's that combination of things. I don't think there's any one right answer. There are other people who will probably say reading, and right, I do read as well and listen to podcasts. Podcasts have become huge, and so there's a lot of podcasts out there that you can go to get learning. It's just all about staying active in your journey to know, right? Staying active in your journey to learn more and just know all the things that are happening out and just in the
Yeah.
business as a whole.
I want to comment on a couple of points here. I think this is such a beautiful point. This personal board of directors, by the way, this is something that I first came across in this book by self-help expert Marshall Goldsmith. You know, he's known as the originator of the school of coaching itself, the entire world of coaching. And he talks about this not only in terms of advice and mentorship, but also in terms of accountability. So
Yeah.
actually, he has somebody who calls him up at 8 p.m. every day and holds him accountable for the projects and the goals that he has set for himself. And he says that even somebody like me, who appears to the outside world as highly self motivated, falls to the biggest human fallibility, which is we need to be held accountable by somebody. And I think that is so true. The more you are in a leadership position, the less you're being held accountable on that day-to-day basis. It's of course quarterly filings and
Yep.
and monthly progress, but this personal board of directors is a great input. Thank you for bringing that up. The CISO society that you mentioned, Larry, for CISOs that might be listening to this podcast, and we will also put these links in the description of wherever we post this. How is it on LinkedIn? How do they find you guys? How do they become
Yeah,
a member
it's
of this?
yeah. If you just on LinkedIn, where there's a lot of content on LinkedIn, but you could also just go to the website. It's the CISOsociety.com, and it's
Okay.
free. It's free membership for acting CISOs, um, and it's just a great place and way to communicate and gather together.
Awesome. The CISOsociety.com, we will
Yep.
put that in the caption and also in the description. Awesome. Larry, coming back to the life of a CISO and the myriad decisions that they have to make, especially in terms of buying new tech. I mean, I'm sure you and I, we were at RSA and we saw what 3,000 vendors on the expo floor, and it just continues to explode, right? And I was like, I don't want to be a CISO. I don't want to be walking through this expo floor and figuring out where do I spend my next dollar, right? um, what kind of mistakes do you find CISOs make when making these buying decisions? And then also the second part of the question, which I'd like you to take up, is as a vendor, you and I, we were discussing about how should vendors approach security teams and CISOs. So if you could speak on both sides, from a CISO's perspective and then also from a vendor's perspective.
Yeah. So the number one thing that CISOs do wrong when selecting tools is if they don't get their team involved first.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times and I've made this mistake myself, right? Where I see a shiny object. I know a problem that we have. I see a shiny object, and I go and say, "Yes, I think we should do that." And I go to
Mm-hmm.
my team, and I've gone to my team after the fact. In that instance, I went to my team after the fact, and the reality was, from an operational standpoint, it didn't meet the needs. It didn't meet the needs of what we wanted to do. But where I'll
Right.
say CISOs also make mistakes today, and which is part of why we founded Confide, is they only look at technologies in one way. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
problem I need to solve. They solve this problem, right? So, okay, I have this problem that calls for a widget. They can solve the widget problem, but the reality is their strategy may be going left when my cyber strategy in my organization is going right. So uh, when you look at a technology in a very narrow view, just based on the problem it solves, you're going to lose more than you are going to win because you aren't looking at who the founders are and what their background is. You don't understand how much they've overpromised and underdelivered to previous customers. You don't know what their retention rate is. You don't know what their funding is. Are they going to be around in 18 months? Right? I had a company that literally went out of business after 18 months after I bought them
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't secure any more funding. Right? But I hadn't dug that deep into it. And so now I dig way more deeply into everything about the company, everything about the founders, everything about who's backing them, where the funding's at, everything about their availability and ability and capability to get more funding if they need it. Like all of these things matter because if a founder has the idea that, oh, I just built this company to get acquired by Palo, what if you're a Zscaler shop? Right, right. Like so, there's so many different little nuances that CISOs face, and need to think through that they haven't on a large scale. The other piece, so to vendors, so vendors must number one recognize that CISOs may sign the check, but
Mm-hmm.
the influencers are more important than the CISO.
Right.
Meaning, the CISO's team is going to drive the decision. I don't
Right.
care who the CISO is and what the CISO does.
Right.
It's just the fact of the matter. So many vendors think I need to get to the CISO. Right, I got to the CISO, now everything's golden. I'm done. Not necessarily.
Mhm. That's very true. That's very. Larry, could you also give us examples of, speaking to this aspect of point solutions? Where have you seen more security theater than true security? This is something that you bring up in your writings as well, right?
Yeah, this security has been a very interesting ecosystem over the last,
Mm.
and I've watched the changes from inside, and there's a lot of there's it's really all over the place. I don't know if there's one place versus another that there's more security data or less, right? It's the entire ecosystem of security has had money fly into it in a very quick way over the last 20 years specifically. And as that money has flown into it, whether it's private equity, whether it's venture capital, right, all the money has been flying into security to pump up and enable the creation of new tools. What we're getting is the market being flooded with
Mm.
one distinct row of tools at a time, right? So I'll use a great example: the NHI space, so non-human identities, right?
Mhm.
Listen, it is an important space because it's something that we sort of push to the side, right? So as it relates to the entire identity space, right, we focus so much on the human identities that we sort of left machine identities and keys, and then we created APIs because of the cloud and all these things, and they just sort of sat over in the side. And we knew that they're authenticating, but we weren't really dealing with the governing of that much. So somebody came out and said, hey, non-human identity, we're creating a new category. Gartner bought off on it. Once one came, we've now got 10 plus NHI specific companies that have
Mhm.
been created, right? And so you're like, well, wait, what is happening? How are all of these companies, right, focusing on this one space of identity, and why is that different than others? Then what happened? There became a shift where now NHI is the marketing tool, but these tools say, no, we focus on all aspects of identity governance. So now the IGA space has blown up over the last 2 years, where people are
Yep.
saying identity governance, but now you've got NHI as a call out and APIs as a call out, where API security was its own thing at one point. And so now all of these different things are call outs. And we're going to continue to see that just because there's so much money in this space to be made. I am I am I struggle with the fact that I say this a lot, and people have probably heard me say this. So I think the foundation of everything we do in cyber is know what you have, know who has access to it, know where it's at, and know where it's going. It's pretty simple, right? So if you think about know what you have, that's asset management. We have never gotten asset management right from a physical device standpoint. We have
Yep.
never ever gotten asset management right. It's something that we know, but we do very lightly. Well, now data is an asset. Now APIs are assets. Now keys are assets. So the boundary of what an asset is has been expanded, and it gets defined differently at every organization. So we haven't gotten that right yet. And the number of assets that people have now is even greater because, right, it used to just be you had a desktop, but then you went from a desktop to a laptop, or maybe you had both a desktop and a laptop. Then you went from a laptop to a laptop and a phone. Then you went from a laptop to and a phone to a laptop, a phone, and an iPad, right? Where you've got this data floating around and people have access via all these things. So what with that and us having not gotten that right, and after all this time, again, I've been in this industry for 32 years at this point. How are we're creating new categories every day, right? The AI and now agentic AI, right, which is still a data problem, is this new world of challenge that but we haven't gotten some of these foundational components right yet. And
Yep.
so I get very flustered and frustrated sometimes because I see these new things come out that people want to jump at, and I'm like, but you haven't gotten the basics right yet. Where, like, have you gotten your defined an asset? And so now data is everything, right? We've gone into the zettabytes, and I don't even remember what's past zettabytes of data. I 10 years ago I wouldn't have known what a zettabyte was, right? But now we've got organizations that are dealing with zettabytes of data, and they're trying to figure out again some of these basic things of who's got access to what. But now when you exacerbate that with AI, you're taking this data and pumping it all into AI and then enabling business users to utilize AI. We've had recent cases where organizations have had somebody who shouldn't be able to see financial data query and see financial data simply because they pumped all this data into this LLM, right, to create this AI opportunity for the business, and now you've got everybody with access to everything. Like it's mind numbing sometimes, and I
Yeah.
feel bad for CISOs because CISOs are the only C-level executive in organizations with a bullseye on their chest from the governments and from vendors selling to them, and like the CISO has a bullseye on their chest, and everybody's shooting an arrow at it.
I call it the Damocles sword. It's always hanging on their heads. And as you said earlier, they don't own the risk, but they own all the responsibility of that risk materializing. And to your point, in terms of know what you have, know who has access to it, where is it at, where does it lie, where is it going, this boils down to accurate, effective risk management, and that being the basis of those decisions rather than, what did the guy down the street buy, or what the other CISO is investing in, or what's the regulator pushing for, and things like that. So I think it should all drive from risk, but somewhere, especially in compliance, we ignore risk and we become very very prescriptive and compliance focused. So Larry, CISOs, their role, their pressures, their compulsions, uh, best practices. We've covered so much ground. We could possibly speak for another couple of hours on this topic. I've been making extensive notes. I've got like 2 pages of notes. I love, and I just want to quickly summarize them. I will not do justice to it, but I still would like to do it, the summarization. So, I think the best starting point that you made was influence matters. Build that influence, create relationships within the organization, not just with your peers, but even your boss's peers. I think that was a very key point. Um, Go with an open mind, ask them what matters to them, what their incentivization looks like, and then how can you help them win in their careers and in their business, in their roles. I mentioned this book, Project Phoenix. I strongly recommend everybody to read that. It speaks a lot about how to build that influence. You gave some great examples of the premise with which you could go into these meetings. One idea that you also emphasized was to go in and build the response capabilities as the first big project, maybe for a CISO coming into a new role. Um, uh, because it's given that there will be a breach during this CISO's tenure or the next ones, and so how they respond to it, how transparent they are, how the speed and the agility of containment messaging, all of this is going to matter a lot. And this is also a great way to bring other business leaders into the security conversation. Couple of beautiful points that you brought in. Community, you mentioned the community that you run, the CISOsociety.com, to which you're an advisor. 1700 CISOs. Please visit the website. If you're a CISO, apply, and you'll be made a member of it. You also spoke about a personal board of directors, which I think is a brilliant point, not just for CISOs, but generally in life, to have people who you look up to, who you can use as a sounding board, but also they hold you accountable for your commitments to yourself and to your role. We spoke about buying mistakes, from both the buying side and from the selling side. And we also spoke about risk as the basis for all critical decisions, as it rightly should be. Um, it's a high stress role, Larry. You've been a CISO. You have friends who are CISOs. You have clients who are CISOs. How do you advise CISOs handle this stress of the role that it brings?
Yeah. So I have this conversation a lot with CISOs and people in cyber in general, right? Like there's stress for a lot of people in a lot of different roles in cyber, but the CISO role has got some very unique stresses to it. But first, my first order of business is to remind them that um, you don't own the risk. Like a lot of times, CISOs take on the stress because they feel like if they don't solve every problem, they're going
Mm.
to, right? And it's just not the case. So I try and focus on the truths versus well, I'll say the rumors, right? Because you hear a lot of rumors about the CISO role. So I try and get them to focus on the truth that's in front of them. Number two, tell them literally you have to step away. You have to find time to do things you love, be with people you love, and right. And so for some people, quiet time is something they love, like maybe going fishing, get out of the boat. But find things that you can do that you love that allow you to not think, right? So for me, right, it's family. For me, it's family. I've got a lot of kids. I've got an amazing wife. Like it's the times with her and the dogs and walking, and I have a de-stress every morning when I'm not traveling. I've got a 2.5 mile trail or trek that we walk with the dogs that her and I walk, and it's a morning of decompression where there's nothing that I've got, right, no pressure. We talk about our relationship, we talk about kids, we talk about the day, but it's a way for me to just and set myself for the day. But I also have faith, and because of my faith, I know that every high is temporary, just like every low is temporary. And so, my ultimate de-stressor, though, and my wife will tell you, is basketball. When I'm completely stressed out, it's not that sometimes I would go play basketball and give a guy an elbow and tell him that's not about you. That's right. That's really I'm elbowing the CEO of my company or something like that. But a lot of times I just go out to my court outside and I just shoot. And I just go out and I just shoot. And I may put up 50 or 100 shots. I just shoot. And I'll do that, right, with some music on, and I'll just sit there doing that, and it just brings me down. So I say this to say everybody's got something. That
Right.
thing that is their de-stressor, that person that helps them de-stress, right? Sometimes it's your community. You want to go vent. We have people in the CISO society who come in and just vent about things like, and sometimes just that screaming via the keyboard in a safe space
Mm.
lets you take a deep breath and get it out. And so just find that piece that means for you, but you gotta have it, right? You cannot bottle it up. You cannot, keep this stuff inside. You've got to find these mechanisms that are going to work for you as an individual, right? And when you could, but you got to make the time. You've got to be purposeful in doing it. You can't just say one day I'll get to it. Like I said, I'm about to turn 53, and I know a number of people who have not made it to 53 because of one stress or another that's had negative impacts on their health. So whether it's eating, right? So some people find food is a comfort, right? So just figure out whatever that de-stressor is for you and figure out a way that you can do it in it safely that's going to keep you level headed and keep you calm and because situations are going to get tougher.
That's wonderful, Larry. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And I have learned a lot. And I'm sure that those who listen to it, those who read the blog summary of it, will also get some awesome insights. And, please reach out, those who are listening in, those who are watching, please reach out to Larry on LinkedIn. It's Larry Whiteside Confide Group. And if you're a CISO, please log in to thecisosociety.com and see if being a member makes sense. Thank you so much, Larry. It's been a
Thank,
real pleasure.
thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yep.